what is the Jewish religious view on work and career? Now, you have three choices or four. A, is it a necessary evil that provides us the means of serving God, like studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, being kind and charitable to others? B, is it a part and parcel of our spiritual mission and journey? C, is it neither intrinsically positive or negative? So long as we are honest in our business, do not allow our work and career to consume our lives to the exclusion of our spiritual life. So thinking like a religious leader, if let's say you were in the chair of being a rabbi as a religious leader, and someone is asking you the question, what does Judaism say about work? Would you choose A, B, or C? And this is not a rhetorical question because this is debated a lot amongst Judaism, and you can have the arguments for both sides. Anyone want to take a stab at it? Yes, you and then Brad.
C.
I'll repeat it for everybody.
I think it's C because number one,
You think it's C, and the reason for that is?
the reason is so long as we're honest in business and we don't let business consume our personal life to the point that it impacts the home life or the spiritual life.
So you're saying that C is correct because as long as we're honest, and there's a backing to that because the Talmud says that one of the questions when a soul comes up to heaven is one of the first questions that the heavenly tribunal asks is, have you been honest and conducted your business with integrity? So you can say that that's the answer. Anyone else have a different answer? Brad? You say B, it's part and parcel of our spiritual journey. Okay, we'll what? Torah says you shall work for 6 days. Ivan, and then we'll.
He's right. He's
He's
right.
right. Okay, so you say that it's B and C. Okay, so we'll soon see and A. Okay, we'll soon see what the Rebbe's answer is to that. Next question. In your estimation, what is the Jewish religious view on affluence? A, is it encouraged? B, is it discouraged? C, depends on. So what's your answer on that? Yes, Roz?
I think it's C. It depends on what you do with your wealth.
It depends what you do with your wealth. Okay, anyone have any other ideas? I see there's a chat. Someone said A, okay. Anyone else? Okay. Actually, we're going to see something of the way traditional Judaism looks at it. So historically, Jews were very wary of material success. Let's give a look at some of the reasons for that. So if you look at page 5, does everybody have a book? Everybody has a book? If you look at page 5, text 1a, this is a verse out of Deuteronomy, the portion of Azinu, which speaks about the future of the Jewish people when they're going to be in the land of Canaan out of the desert. And Moshe warns them and he says, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivot. Yeshurun is Israel grew fat. It doesn't mean necessarily physically, but fat by being with all kinds of luxuries and kicked, rebelled. You grew fat, thick, and rotund. Israel forsook the God who made them and spurned the rack of their salvation. So from that perspective, you say that the more wealth you have, the more that you have from the fat of the land, the more you rebel against God. Another verse is taken from Proverbs, which speaks about how to pray to God. So it says, this is text 1b, a poor person speaks with supplications because they have a broken heart. A rich person replies with impudence. So if you think about it, you don't have to be a rocket science to realize that when someone has excessive wealth, it can easily distract them from their spiritual pursuits and lead a person to greed, indulgence, and self-absorption. And it takes away the priority of their religious of their religious involvement. In fact, it's brought down in many places that there were Jews that said, "Give us just enough that we have a sufficient livelihood, but don't test us with the test of wealth. Don't test us with the test of poverty." In the Musar movement, there is this whole idea of called istapkut, be satisfied with little. And we see that even in Pirkei Avot, it says if you want to be a Torah scholar, eat a little, sleep a little, and indulge yourself in the Torah study. What you're going to learn now is that the Rebbe had a different attitude. He embraced the challenge of wealth, seeing it as a divine blessing. One of the places that they saw it was right in the early years of the Rebbe's leadership. So if you go look on page 6, text 2, let me just give you the background for this. The Rebbe would rarely leave his office or his home, except to go to the burial place of his father-in-law. He went to Camp Gan Israel 3 times, but he wouldn't go out and visit. People would come and see him. I remember when President Shazar came the first time as president, it was in 1966. And Shazar was a disciple of the Rebbe. And he was debating, and the Secret Service says, you're a president now, the Rebbe should come to you. And the answer was, the order is that we go to the Rebbe doesn't go to anyone else. That was the norm. However, when it came to visiting giving condolence to the grieving, those that were grieving after a lost one, which is called Nicham Avelim, comforting the mourners, then the Rebbe did go to certain people. And here was a case in 5718 that he went to visit one of the great Rebbes in New York at that time. His name was the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So let's see, the Rebbe says to him, Jewish individuals need to secure financial security. And that is an important, positive, and appropriate goal in of itself, regardless of the additional imperative to fund Torah institutions in specific locations. In other words, the Rebbe said for a Jew to live normally, they have to have broadness of mind. The Talmud says, and the Rebbe quoted it, that there are 3 things that bring comfort to a person. And one of them is to have a nice house and to have wealth. So the Rebbe continues, financial success enables Jews to live comfortably and expansively, and that will also enable them to broaden their perspectives. For our sages taught, a beautiful home expands one's mind. And they meant that in the most literal sense. If only all Jewish people would be wealthy. The Kapishnis Rebbe says to him, but wealth is a challenge. I fear that test it poses. And the Rebbe said, poverty is equally a challenge. If there must be a challenge, the test of wealth is preferable over that of poverty. God will certainly help us successfully withstand the challenge. Now, I have to put this into perspective. The Rebbe lived a very, very simple life. After the Rebbe's wife passed away, the Rebbe opened up his house that everybody should be able to come in. The furniture was very, very simple. And the Rebbe moved into the house in 1954. All the furniture, all of the appliances, all the equipment was exactly the same that they installed in 1954. And I'm talking about in 1988, 87, 88. It didn't change at all. After the Rebbe's wife, after the finish of mourning, the Rebbe gave away his house to charity and moved into his office, which was a tiny little space. His office is much smaller than this room. There was a little kitchen outside, he had a bed, and he had his work. So the Rebbe definitely did not live an ostentatious life. The Rebbe also criticized people that pursue all kinds of luxuries, like a Hollywood kitchen, and they need to have the fanciest car. But it didn't take away from his understanding that wealth is something that changes the person. It puts them in a relaxed place, and they can do a lot of good with it, as we will soon see. The Rebbe did not leave the Kapishnis Rebbe until he got a promise from him that he agrees with him that there should be wealth. So why is this all about? Why is this so important? There are a lot of reasons for it. First of all, the good that one can do and the influence that one has. The Talmud says in Baba Basra that Rabbi Judah the Prince, who was himself very wealthy, and he was very friendly with the Roman Emperor. So it says about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, that he used to honor the wealthy. And the Rebbe asked, why would he honor the wealthy? And the Rebbe answered that if God blessed someone with wealth, that means that they have a potential to do a tremendous amount of good. And the honor was to awaken that idea of goodness. Now, I'm going to show you a video, which this was a very, very famous story. And we live with the story as kids. Actually, the person that's going to be the main person in this video, I knew him very well. He was very close to my father as well. And when my mother used to take us up to Monticello for the summer, he had a bungalow right next to us. So every time he would come up and down, we would travel with him. He would kibitz with us and tell us stories. And he became fabulously wealthy. He says he made a living. But what was the story that led to his wealth?
We'll start with Purim 1955, when the Rebbe spoke about the test of wealth, and then made an incredible offer.
Der Nisoyen von Aschiris ist ein sehr schwerer Nisoyen, von deswegen allweil alle Juden gesagt geworden, sollen alle werden gewinnen. In Amerika ist Minig, jede Sache stellt nach Wut als Abstimmung. Ich die, was eine Maske im Mund nehmen als hier, der Rebester soll sie geben, Aschire ist der Floge. Und sie hat nicht der Haravani, was sie und der darf Milchome haben. Mit dem Jezer Horror soll sie nicht Machschel sein, soll nur heben der rechte Hand, der Leber Scholle.
We were sitting by a Farbrengen, and the Rebbe said that anyone who wants to become wealthy, raise your hands. Now, who has the audacity that I should ask the Rebbe about Gashmias? The Rebbe is for Ruchnistik, so most of the people wouldn't have the audacity to raise their hand.
Reb Shmuel Isaac Popak was said to have raised his hand, a fact that he would never confirm or deny, although he always told the story.
6 or 7 people raised their hands, and they all became millionaires. Subsequently, I asked the Rebbe for a broche. I had no parnosa at all, and the Rebbe told me I should go into real estate, which I did. And I told the Rebbe I had no money. The Rebbe says, you don't need money to go into real estate. So through certain maneuvering, we were able to buy 2 houses without any cash. That started us off in the real estate business, and thank God we make a living.
I want to say just one thing about him, that he passed away a few years ago, and he left the business in the hands of his son. He has a few kids that are on shlichut, but one of them is a businessman, and he's enormously wealthy, and he's one of the most philanthropic people that you would ever find. He gives to poor people, he gives to yeshiva students, he'll go to a school and he'll see a broken playground, he'll put out money, and it all came from that blessing. So this is one idea, and by the way, when the Rebbe says such a thing, everybody was waiting for him to say it again. I want to give you a little background to the story. This I heard from my father, that in the last year of the life of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe wanted that there should be wealth in Chabad to support Jewish people that were coming out of Russia and coming out of Poland. And a lot of people had to establish themselves, establish schools. And he made a pact with 10 people that they should go to the previous Rebbe and ask him, that he should give a blessing, that they should become wealthy. But by the time they all gathered together, the previous Rebbe passed away. A year after the Rebbe took the leadership, the same group came to the Rebbe. And they told the Rebbe, now you're in the seat, we're demanding it from you. And the Rebbe, workplace affords us a unique opportunity to inspire others. We were speaking about text number 5. So we were playing on the word echad. Echad means one. So I gave you the story that in God's film it says, who is likened to you, Israel, one nation. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi takes the word echad and he says it doesn't just mean one nation. It means that even when they're involved ba'oretz, when they're involved in earthly matters, they're never separated from the one God. That's the main thing. It is therefore appropriate that we do not perform all of our mundane engagements for material ends, but rather in order to bring sustenance to others, pieces of godliness, and supply them with which they lack, out of gratitude and kindness to them. In doing so, we resemble our Creator, the one God, for God performs free kindness at all times, and his kindness is true. In other words, it's not for any reward, in that he animates the universe and all the contents at every single moment. So what's the idea? This, I think, is the cornerstone idea of why business is important. The idea is to reveal the oneness of God in the materialism, to reveal the oneness of God even in the mundane, that it's not something which is separate from God. It's just like when we eat a meal, before we eat, we recite a blessing, we recognize the blessing of God in the food, we recognize the spark of God in the food. When we do business, let's say someone is like this Mayor Zeiler, who was speaking the last, I know him quite well. I've been to his house in Israel. And he's very big in the plastic and textile business. And actually, the story with him was he's a New Yorker. You can hear it from his accent. And his father-in-law owned one of the biggest plastic companies where they made plastic upholstery and other vinyl stuff in Connecticut, New Haven. And the Rebbe wanted that they should start a plant in Israel, so to accommodate the Jews that are coming out from the Soviet Union, that they should have what to work with. And this son-in-law decided to take on the task. And he was able to start the business, even though he had to deal with the Israeli bureaucracy at the time. And he actually made his business double and triple than what was in the United States. And he had a lot of customers throughout Europe. And I know him and his wife quite well. And it's interesting, he is the happiest person that he's in Israel, and he always has this concept, and he says, I go to places and I think it's for business, but really it's to reveal the spark of Judaism. So this is another concept that we have to deal with. Now, I want to go to text 6. But before I go to text 6, I just want to mention something. There was no question that the Rebbe saw the act of charity as being one of the most important mitzvot. Now, when the Rebbe spoke about charity, he never spoke about charity to be given to him. He spoke about doing acts of charity. In 1986, the Rebbe started to give out dollar bills every Sunday and give a blessing, so that you should give it to charity of your choice. If somebody came to him for a blessing and he said to give charity, he would say on the condition that you don't give it to any Chabad institution. So you shouldn't think that I was taking advantage from you, that you should give it to me or one of my institutions. But the Rebbe was the concept of tzedakah in general. The Rebbe felt that the more someone is active in business and commerce, they can give more job opportunities, just like the Zeiler in Israel was able to give job opportunities to many immigrants that came from the Soviet Union, but also that they can do more tzedakah. And here's an example of a Russian Jew, Chabad, who lived in Kfar Chabad. And Kfar Chabad is a agricultural village of Chabad. And not only do they grow food there, but they also have a lot of chicken farms and turkey farms there. And he owned a turkey farm. And he had an opportunity in 1970. You know, for me, I lived in Kfar Chabad for 2 years, in 1974, 75, and part of 76. And I was a Brooklyn boy, and coming to this town and hearing the turkeys and the chickens, and just, even though we had this big yeshiva, but we were surrounded by all these farms, it was like such a culture shock. But it definitely looks like an old shtetl from the past. So he didn't know. He had an opportunity to expand his business. And he was very afraid, because it was going to take away time from Torah study. And is he just indulging in materialism? So he wrote to the Rebbe, and if you look at text 6, what the Rebbe answered, and he says, your question whether it's appropriate for you to desire for further expand your income, that question has already been answered. 10% of one's earnings must be given to charity. And ideally, for those who wish to step beyond the basic requirement and enhance their observance, 20%. In fact, Rabbi Shneur Zalman explains that it is appropriate to give even more than that. Now, just a caveat, not to the point where one becomes dependent on anyone else. But what the Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi says, if somebody has a family member that's sick and the medical care is not covered by insurance, they're not going to think twice how much money they spend. They'll spend and spend as much as they get them healthy. This is charity is a redeeming thing for the person. So the Rebbe writes, this is especially relevant now that institutions that require charitable support require expansion, and therefore their financial needs are constantly growing as well. Consequently, additional charity is required, and that demands greater income. So I'll show you another video, if we have it, where the Rebbe actually tells people that were struggling in business, make a decision that you're going to give 10% to charity, and their business turned around.
Ja, also von der Seite sie drücken wir. Wir haben den so verkaufen.
Was verkaufen die Retail Stores?
Nein,
Die ganzen
ganze
Geschäfte?
Geschäft, ja. Was ist erst der Umstände sind nicht so geht. Und sagt so diese sagen der Company, der Menschen neu sein sagen, es kann wachsen, ob andere Menschen kommen rein mit der Sache ihr Geld.
Was da eine gute Sache, was da zu gehen andere?
Nicht. So was der Rebbe ist also
Nein, mit das manche ist eben Konzept für verkaufen. Aber eben mit die Geld, was sie bekommen, wird sie das investen in ein Geschäft. Aber mit das sein weiter aktiv mit dem Geschäft, wo dem Massage-Docke, die Besitzer hat hier gegeben, was
so der Rebbe halt also verhalten eine Arbeit nach dem.
Ja, aber die Sesenteil muss als Mamsche sein. Sie will Papier verkaufen. Macht mit Tees, aber mit der Maya, sie soll tegen die das, was sie bleiben bei, soll sie das verstärken und verbrechen.
I want to say something about this David Mintz. He was the founder of Tufudi, and when he became successful, he was asking the Rebbe, what he should do and expand. And the Rebbe said you should get a warehouse that you can't see from one end to the other end. And he became extremely successful. Now there are a lot of imitations of tofu ice cream. In his day, when he started it, the concept of non-dairy ice cream didn't exist. He had some retail stores as well. And this was very important. Now we're going to go, I'm looking at the clock. So now another area, and this is a very, very sensitive area as well. And that's the Rebbe's attitude when it came to retirement. So what do you think is the optimal, if you give a look at page 15, let's ask the question, what do you consider the optimal age of retirement? 41 to 50, 51 to 60, 61 to 70, post 70? I tell you, when the Rebbe turned 70, he spoke about it publicly, that there were those that recommended that he should go into retirement. And the Rebbe said, I haven't even started yet. And in order to celebrate his 70th birthday, because there were so many people there, he asked if 71 new institutions can be opened for Torah and mitzvahs around the world. So the idea of retirement didn't exist. In the Rebbe's 80s, there was a couple that came and they said their children wanted to go into retirement and go into a nursing home. And the Rebbe asked them their age. They said, we're very old. They were hitting 80. And the Rebbe said, you're talking to someone that's already way in the 80s, so why are you saying that you're very old? You'll see here a video, it's not that long, of a couple that really was resigned to retirement, and the Rebbe didn't let them. And the Rebbe said, now there's a lot of reasons for that. You have to have a purpose in life. And if you're successful at something that you're doing, you continue on and you don't stop. The moment you stop, you begin to vegetate. I knew people in our neighborhood that they were forced to retire because they worked for unions, and they began to deteriorate immediately.
hatte ich wieder
Ja, das ist nicht. Aber wie merkt ihr das?
Das hat mich in der Konversation.
Ja, aber wie merkt ihr vorher?
Dann nehme ich, dass wir lernen nehmen.
Okay,
So kann man nur.
ja. Ich will gerade so beten, für gesunde Nachfrage.
Ja, soll ich sagen, wenn die gesund sind, gesunde Kinder und wenn gesunde Psyche ist, dann man kann schon ein bisschen.
Ja, maar
Und deswegen die Time. Mit mir in der Wahl nicht sagen. Dann geht das gleich in Sind Französische Frau, die können die letzten Haus. The retirement is only for old people, or young young person. At 220, how much money you need? 220, you have 45 years. To be good, to the best thing for you and Geschäften, that you can certainly continue it, not fast to thinking about retiring. You must gain much more money to give much more tzedakah, and to do so in good mood and good health together with your family.
And things are moving along well, and I'm not going to retire.
Yeah, thank you. Forget about.
Okay. If we realize that going to work has a spiritual purpose, and that's what we were created for, by retiring, we're basically saying to God, we don't need the mission anymore. Yes.
Rebbe or God said retirement somehow?
Absolutely.
Because starting, I'm telling myself that I retire.
Okay, so I will explain that. The Rebbe addressed it actually in the early 80s, and he said the following. His opinion against retirement doesn't mean that the person has to work with the same vigor and the same physical stamina that he worked in the past. Everybody has to measure themselves. But one of the things that the Rebbe was very upset, especially in the United States, was there's an attitude that youth reigns. The youth are the smartest ones. They know everything because they know technology. And when somebody reaches retirement age, they toss them out and say, you're an old fogey, we'll give you retirement money, we don't need you. When the truth of the matter is that the seniors are the ones that built it, and they have the knowledge, and they can give the counsel. So the retirement doesn't mean, the anti-retirement doesn't mean that they don't have to be walking the floor the whole time, but the anti-retirement means don't disappear from the scene. Be involved in it. Yeah, you definitely adjust it according to your capabilities. But at the same time, the word retire is anti the concept of purpose. What does retire mean? I'm retiring from life. I'm retiring from duties. I want to take it easy. And what happens the moment you say, I want to take it easy and I have no more obligations, you're saying to God, even though you're giving me strength and you're giving me abilities, I don't want to use it anymore. And that's wrong, because we can do a tremendous amount as giving us a senior counsel. And there are some European communities where you see that they engage and link up the older generation with the younger generation, and there's a lot of pride in that. So even though the younger generation is better in technology, as you just saw here today, right? It's obvious that my son is better in technology than I am, but it doesn't mean that I'm out of the council. So I want to go over just a few things before we finish, because it's important. One thing is the idea of there has to be faith in God as well. One of the things that people suffer a lot from is that they go into business and they feel they're all alone. And the truth of the matter is that having faith in God's blessings actually brings out the revealed source of it. What does it mean, having faith? Having faith doesn't mean not to do the work. You have to do the work because the Torah says you should do the work, but you'll realize that doing the work, you have a partner, and God is your partner. If you have faith and you work steady and you do things right, God will lead you to the right destination and give you the right ability to do what you have to do in order to get the parnasa. If you give a look at page 16, text 7, this was a letter written in English, so it's not a translation. I received your letter in which you write about the anxiety in regard to your question of parnasa, which is livelihood. You surely know how often our sages have impressed on us the importance of trust and confidence in God, in order that we realize that all difficulties encountered in life are only trials and tests of a passing nature. To be sure, the question of parnasa is one of the most difficult tests. Nevertheless, God does not subject one to a greater test that they cannot withstand. As our sages expressed it, according to the camel, so is its load. The very trust in God is a vessel and a channel to receive God's blessings, apart from the fact that such confidence is good for one's health and disposition, and therefore it's also a natural means to the desired end. So I want to take it a step further. Life was not meant to be an easy ride. And if anyone thinks that life is an easy ride, they're mistaken. Life is meant to be full of challenges. What does the challenge do? The challenge, A, reveals the inner strength that we have, but sometimes it also forces us to be able to reveal the hidden treasures that are found beyond our normal conventional reach, that we need to go out of our way to find it. So there are disappointments in life all the time, and anyone that's in business knows that. Any work, any job, whichever job you're in, there's always going to be challenges, and the challenges can sometimes cause that we question ourselves. But the end of the day is that if you have the faith and you have the confidence, you will be able to see what's beneath it, and you'll be able to reveal the hidden blessings that are there. And people tell these stories all the time of how that helps them. Now, there is a discourse that the Rebbe gave in 1977, based on the words that it says in Song of Songs, that all the great waters cannot extinguish my love to you, and the raging rivers cannot wash it away. It's a love song between a bride and a groom. But as we know what the Talmud says, it's the love song between God and the Jewish people. And the Rebbe explains over there that the raging rivers that we're talking about is the hardships that we encounter when we are at work, especially when we're in business. You can pursue a client who knows how many times, and you don't know if you get the deal. Or if you try to create a new product and invent something, there's so many fails until you get to it. But along the way, you reveal such secrets and you feel much better about it. So this is where the faith comes in. Another thing, the Rebbe was very, very strong. This was true especially to retailers, that they should be closed on Shabbat. Whenever they came to the Rebbe for a blessing, the Rebbe would make it conditional. Keep your store closed on Shabbat. There's a video here of a friend of ours by the name, it just happens to be that I know a lot of the people in the video, so I've been around a long time. This guy is Ami Paikovsky. He has a very good friend here in Charlotte by the name of Tzvika Cohen. I don't know how many of you know Tzvika Cohen. He comes here to shul. They're friends, buddies from the army. This Ami Paikovsky lives in Israel today, but he lived in Los Angeles for a while, and he ran a very successful special clothing store, which he made a lot of money. And one day he had this idea of closing on Shabbat, and he tells the story of the challenge that he faced.
I started a store, clothing store in downtown Los Angeles, 3,000 square feet store. I really seriously was saying myself, like, I want to close the store on Shabbos. I don't want to work on Shabbos. But it was difficult to think like this because most of the business you're doing on Shabbos. There was some Shabbos I used to sell $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on Shabbos. During the week, barely I can sell $100, $150. Now the contract, the lease I have, I was obligated 20 years lease. The owner, he warning me in the beginning, if you ever was thinking to leave this lease, I'm going to run after you to the rest of your life. I'm not going to let you go out from it. So I wrote to the Rebbe, told them, Rebbe, I decide to close my store on Shabbos. I would like to have a blessing. I should not get hurt. I'm getting a letter, and in the envelope I open, I see $18, and then it say, 1. מתחיל מקודם שקיעת החמה וגדול הזכות. 2. להפיץ את התורה מתוך שמחה. 3. לתת צדקה שמה, to give צדקה at the money what he gave me. The next day I say, I'm going to go to the landlord, and I'm going to give him the lease, and the landlord was not there. I came back to my store. There is a guy walking to my store. He wants to buy the store, he's telling me. So I told him, go to the landlord. He's telling me, I was with the landlord. I said, what the landlord told you? He said, you holding the lease, אתה מחזיק את החוזה. He took a checkbook and he wrote me a nice check. Just can tell you, with this check I bought a house and I started manufacturing. And I remember going to the Rebbe, and on Sunday I told the Rebbe, I got a miracle with the store. The Rebbe was laughing and he went like this on my mouth, like, don't talk about this.
הרב, אנחנו השקענו שלושתנו בביזנס של לסגור בשבת. אנחנו צריכים ברכה והצלחה.
בשביל השבת ויום טוב.
ויום טוב.
ושבת
ויום טוב סגור.
В первую очередь нужно соблюдать субботу. Так как это Бог указал, что Асерес Адибис, когда он дал Торы, он начал с того, что каждый еврей до конца времен должен соблюдать субботу.
I started my practice on Nulatz Avenue, and things looked very bleak. It wasn't going anywhere. I remember having a friend. I happened to have mentioned to him that I was having some problems. This young man suggested that the Rebbe would be able to help me, and I made an appointment with the Rebbe. I started to tell him I wasn't doing well here in Brooklyn, and I was able to find a place in Bayside. I was going to be starting an office there. He says, do you work on Shabbos? And I said, yes, I do. And he says, now you're going to a new place. He says, you're moving. Perhaps you ought to think about not working on Shabbos. It became known that Dr. Walensky doesn't work on Saturday. And it was unheard of. Dr. Walensky goes to a shul. I was very successful financially, very successful. Even in the way I lived my life, I felt more satisfied, more at ease, very satisfied with being Jewish.
Okay, we just have a few more. I'm going to tell you a little story before we read this. There was a very wealthy man in Los Angeles. His name was Rabbi Dov Weiss, Mr. Dov Weiss. I call him Rabbi Dov. Mr. Dov Weiss. He owned a lot of businesses there. And in 1962, he came to the Rebbe for the first time. And he was there for Simchas Torah, which was a very joyous time. It was packed with thousands of people. He was very, very inspired. And he didn't have an appointment yet with the Rebbe until after the holidays, but he couldn't hold himself back. And by one of the Fabrengens, the Rebbe would sit by the table. There were lots of people around. He couldn't just walk over. He broke through and he came over to the Rebbe and he said, I'm so inspired that I'm going to make a donation of charity. And he quoted a very, very big amount. And the Rebbe looked at him and said, L'chaim, amen, and went on to do whatever he's doing. So he felt like here he's giving this big amount of money. And all he got from the Rebbe was a l'chaim. So a few days later, he had his appointment to go into the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe, is the Rebbe disappointed with me? The Rebbe laughed and he said, no. He said, let me ask you, do you think, there were two brothers of sons of Jacob. One was a Torah scholar, his name was Yisachar, and the other one was Zebulun. Zebulun had these ships that he would travel all around and do commerce. Do you think when Zebulun was on the ship, he didn't have a Torah book? He said, if you would tell me that you're going to add extra time to Torah study, that would give me the happiness. In other words, even though he was giving a big amount to tzedakah, but that was easy for him. But to take off time to study Torah, that was difficult. And that was where the Rebbe wanted him to be challenged. And that's where we see in the next reading on page 19, text 9, the Rebbe was speaking to a group of businessmen, and he said the following. He said, a business person should dedicate a portion of their time each day to Torah study. Although this eats into the time that is usually dedicated to work, not only will the study not detract from their overall success, but on the contrary, the Torah study clears and refines the mind to be able to make better business decisions with greater clarity and efficiency. It calms the spirit, leading to greater success in business and greater happiness in life. This phenomenon is expressed clearly in the Torah itself. If you go on my way and fulfill my commandments, I will provide rain in the optimal time. When we dedicate time for Torah study, we're guaranteed divine blessing for success in a way that is optimal without stress or worry. So what is the meaning of that? The meaning of that is that we can't, in order to remember the oneness of God in our daily work life, we have to set time aside every day to study Torah. And by studying the Torah, it reminds us, it brings the divine into our daily life. The other thing Rebbe championed was the giving of charity. And I mentioned that before. I'm going to skip this video because I have one more video that I want to show you. The video about the charity is very important, but what we see over there is that there were many people that came. Some were asking for blessings in business, some were asking for advice. And the Rebbe said that they should make a commitment of giving 10% to charity. There's a story that the Rebbe told that in the time of the previous Rebbe was in need of printing some Torah books. And there was one person that wasn't a wealthy man, and he came and he said, I make a pledge, and it was way beyond what he was able to give. And the previous Rebbe accepted the pledge. And that year he went into business, and he made 5 times as much of what he pledged. And the Rebbe said what happened was with that pledge, that he opened up the channels of the divine blessing. And what the Rebbe says, when you give charity, you're making God a partner, that you're not alone. Hashem is with you. But the question then is, why were people coming to the Rebbe for business advice? You saw David Mintz from Tilfudi asking the Rebbe whether he should sell his business, not sell his business. Some people were asking other kinds of questions about retirement, and the Rebbe would give advice. So we have a video here, which I think that speaks to what we said at the very beginning, and I'd like to share that video with you.
Rivka Blau is the daughter of Rabbi Mordechai Pinchas Teitz, a prominent rabbinic activist and chief rabbi of Elizabeth, New Jersey. In 1961, she was vice president of Yavne, one of the first Orthodox student organizations on American college campuses.
Our mission statement was that we wanted to promote Jewish learning and Jewish observance on campus, and that we wanted to, I don't remember the exact wording, but that we wanted to enable people who want to know more about their Jewishness to find out, but we knew we had to know more if we were going to be that kind of a presence on campus. It was essentially Jewish learning, Jewish observance, not to feel so alone. And that if people wanted to learn more, we would be available to help them. Those were pretty much that was the essence of the mission statement. And at that time we already had, I think, between 13 and 15 college groups involved. And we also had isolated students in different places. At Rutgers we had 3 or 4 students. At the University of Pennsylvania we had some students. Now, at that time, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a representative who would come to Columbia and who got friendly with the president of Yavne, Joel Levine. And this young man, his last name was Feller, told Joel and me, well actually he told Joel first and then Joel told me, that he wanted to meet with 2 officers of Yavne and to talk to us about how we had gotten started and what we were doing. Our appointment was for 10 o'clock at night, so we came to 770 Eastern Parkway at 10 o'clock at night, and we were asked to come in to see the Rebbe at 12 o'clock. And he asked us many detailed questions about how we had started, how we had found each other, what we were finding on campus, what were the problems, what were the possibilities, what opportunity was there for people who were interested in finding more about their Jewishness, How can we reach them? What do we find worked well? What we found did not work? Very, very to the point questions. At the end, he said, well, I've asked you a lot of questions. Would you like to ask me some questions? And I had no questions to ask of the Rebbe. I thought that this was a wonderful meeting that we had just now had. And I said, no, thank you. And the fellow who was with me said, well, yes, I've spent a Shabbos or two here in Crown Heights, courtesy of this young man that I know from Lubavitch. And I hear all kinds of wonder stories about you. I hear that you know better than the doctor whether there should be surgery or not. You know better than the lawyer which way to proceed with a case. Do you know more medicine than the doctors? Do you know more law than the lawyers? I mean, what kind of thing is this? So the Rebbe smiled, and he said, you know, when a house gets built, the architect draws up a blueprint. He gives the blueprint to the contractor. And then the contractor tells the plumber how to do the plumbing, the mason how to do the masonry, the electrician how to do the electricity, the electrical work. He said it's not that the contractor can do it better than everybody, but he can read the blueprint, and that's why he can give the instructions. So he said, Hashem istakel ba'oraiso vara alma, the blueprint of the world is the Torah. So somebody can understand Torah, he can tell other people what they have to do within their own métier.
Rebbe was very humble, but the Rebbe definitely stemmed from the conviction that everything is ultimately in the Torah. As I mentioned at the outset, that the Rebbe saw the Torah as the Torah of truth. And the truth is true everywhere, not only in the United States or in Russia, up or down, it's true everywhere. So therefore, from the Torah, he was able to pick up the vision of how things are in its reality. And for that reason, he would give advice. There were times that it wasn't about advice. We're not going to talk about things when people came for a blessing, because when people came for a blessing, it was a whole different story. Over there, the Rebbe was in a spiritual realm and see things that others didn't see. I can say personally, my father of blessed memory worked very closely with the Rebbe as part of a team of aides and secretaries, but he was one of the closest ones. Started to work for the Rebbe before the Rebbe accepted the leadership in 1949, and the Rebbe accepted it in 1951. So he was really privy to see a lot of correspondence and be the conveyor of instructions. And I asked him once, while the Rebbe was still alive, are you used to what you are experiencing? Because you must see it on a daily basis. And he says, absolutely not. Every day is like the first day. It's totally unpredictable. And there are things that happen that I just cannot explain away. But one thing that my father told me, and this is what I want to share with you in regards to the Rebbe's advice, that the Rebbe was very, very busy. The Rebbe slept maybe 2 hours a night, sometimes an hour and a half. The amount of work that he produced is just unimaginable. Hundreds and hundreds of volumes of work, thousands upon thousands of letters that he wrote to individuals, and responses on Torah, and then managing Jewish life all over the world. The Rebbe cared about every individual. It's unimaginable how much he carried on himself. So if somebody came to ask the Rebbe's advice, it was with an understanding that you were going to follow it. And if you were not going to follow what the Rebbe said, then don't ask me. Don't involve me. When one would ask something from the Rebbe would immerse himself entirely into the question. It wasn't just like a cut-of-the-mill, run-of-the-mill kind of answer. He would study it and think about it and then write the answer, give the answer, convey the answer. It was something that he personally immersed himself entirely into it. So there had to be that kind of mutual respect as well. And people knew that if they are going to make this effort to ask the Rebbe on business advice, they would follow through. And there was one particular person that wasn't ready to listen to the advice, and my father refused to take in the request until he got a promise from him. And when he got the promise, he accepted it, and he called my father a year later, and he said, I want to tell you that I didn't want to make the promise because I wanted to rely on my own business expertise, but I wanted to know what the Rebbe said. And when the Rebbe gave me the answer, it was against my conventional wisdom, what I thought was the right thing to do. And had I not made the promise to you, I wouldn't have kept it. But because I'm an honest person, I made the promise. I did the way the Rebbe said. And now I want to tell you that not only did he save me millions of dollars, but I actually, through his advice, made millions of dollars. So sometimes it was challenging, but this was the idea that it was a Torah perspective that the Rebbe gave. Now, we only did light work today, which was about work and wealth. Next week, we're going to go into family life, because in family, there was much more personal, it's much more sensitive. And then we're going to go into personal health. Lots of interesting ways of the perception of the Rebbe that we can learn from. So thank you very much. Sorry for the technical problems. We have another computer which we'll use next week. It should be better. And your interaction and your questions and answers will definitely be appreciated. Thank you. You're not retiring, huh?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right.